In 2024, our daughter's family, including our two railfan grandsons, joined us for a trip to the National Railroad Museum in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was my second visit to the museum. We'd also been there in 1972. The Little Sioux Line 2718 was in the yard in 1972, but now it's at the entry. This little crossing gate was there in 1972, but I didn't notice it this time. The museum is privately funded, but its founders managed to get their congressman and senator to get Congress to officially name it the National Railroad Museum. Milwaukee Road 261 is a Class S3 484 Northern built by Alco in 1944. It was the museum's first acquisition and a big attraction there in 1972. However, in 1991 it was leased and subsequently purchased by the Friends of the 261, who restored it and put it into excursion service in Minnesota. It's not at the museum anymore. This 040T from the Menominee Sugar Company was also there in 1972, and I haven't been able to find out what happened to it. When you enter the building, you pass through this small museum on the way to the train exhibits. This 35-foot-long builder's model of a GM Aero train is in the museum. We'll see a real one in the train pavilion. On the way to the indoor locomotives, we pass through the Bauer Drumhead Gallery, which the museum claims is the largest such exhibit known to exist. It features a narrated touchscreen display that provides additional information about each drumhead and route. After going past the drumhead display, we entered the Lenfesty Center, a large climate-controlled hall containing the museum's best exhibits. The Dwight D. Eisenhower is one of 6 surviving LNE RA4 class locomotives. A4s are streamlined 464 Pacifics with 3 cylinders, 2 outside connected and 1 inside connected. 3-cylinder locomotives were common in Europe but pretty rare in the US. The Eisenhower is a twin to the Mallard, which holds the speed record for steam locos of 126 miles per hour. The Mallard is in the British National Railroad Museum in York, and you can see it in my British Trains video. Coupled to the locomotive are 2 LNER cars, used by Eisenhower during the war. We walked through them. Here are Eisenhower's personal quarters, less than I expected for a 5-star. It didn't look much different in 1972. And here's his staff's meeting place. This Railway Express truck was parked near the Eisenhower. Every rail fan knows what this is, a Union Pacific big boy. It's a simple articulated 4884. Number 4017 was built in 1941 by Alco. Big boys were the longest and heaviest reciprocating steam locomotives ever built. They could produce a tractive effort of over 135,000 pounds, and this one certainly impressed my 2 railfan grandsons. When you look at the number of valves and controls in the cab, you can tell it was no mean feat to operate one of these. I remember that when I got there in 1972, I was disappointed to see the big boy sitting out in the open-air shed, apparently not being cared for. Now that it's been cosmetically restored and put in the Lenfesty Center, it looks like it'll be preserved for a very long time. I'm from the Philadelphia area, and I grew up seeing GG1s like this all the time. In fact, it's been declared the official electric locomotive of Pennsylvania. I often rode behind one, but they were never as shiny as this. This is a beautiful example showing off its Art Deco styling and Tuscan red livery. The dual cab design allowed GG1s to operate in both directions without turning around, and the center cab provided safety in the event of a collision, but the engineer had poor visibility and cramped quarters. U.S. Army No. 101 is a 280 consolidation. It's the last of 150 of these built by Baldwin for use in Europe during World War II, but this one never made it there. However, it did see service in Korea during the Korean War. The Army designated these locomotives Pershing class, in honor of the World War I general. The locomotive was there in 1972, but in the Pavilion. Now it's been spruced up and moved to the Lenfesty Center. This is a red bay window caboose. Here's the interior of the caboose. Note that the curtains have a Thomas the Tank Engine theme. This is a flange plow from the Escanaba and Lake Superior Railroad. The boys enjoyed going inside it. I had a little trouble pulling together the history of this saddle tank. It was apparently built in 1923 by Alco and acquired by Pullman in 1934 to shuffle cars on their property. In 1972, it had the number 29 and the name Brilliant Pioneer on it. For a time, it pulled the museum's excursion train, but now it's enshrined in the Lenfesty Center. We walked through the Lake Mitchell, a restored 1920s Pullman sleeper. From the Lake Mitchell, we walked directly into the Joseph Lister Hospital car, which was built in 1930 by Pullman. It was used to transport patients from Chicago to the Mayo Clinic. This is the interior of a mail car. Mail would be sorted on the moving train. This is a boxcar from the Gratitude train, a gift from France after World War II. The train had a car like this for each state. You can see another one in my video from the B&O Museum. Alongside the main museum building is the McCormick train pavilion. It's not climate controlled, but it does protect the rolling stock from weather to an extent. The exhibits here are not as well kept as those in the Lenfesty Center. Let's take a look at the exhibits in the pavilion. This is a GM Aero train, one of only 2 ever built. It was there in 1972, but the coaches were detached from the locomotive. It looks better in the pavilion, but not much seems to have been done to it. The locomotive was built around an experimental power car, and the coaches were modified intercity bus bodies. The Pennsylvania Railroad tried out the first train set starting in 1956. The second train set passed around between a few railroads. The idea was a failure because the engines were underpowered and the coaches were uncomfortable. In 1958, both train sets ended up on the Rock Island line, where they remained until 1966. 506 is an E1 Class 210-2 Santa Fe, built for the Duluth, Mesabi and Northern by Alco in 1919. It was there in 1972, and although its sheathing and asbestos have since been removed, it doesn't look like much else has been done to it. I saw the class referred to as slow drag engines, not really capable of more than 35 or 40 miles an hour. Even so, this one managed to remain in service until 1962. My grandsons played the role of firemen in its cab. Here's me in one of the cabs in 1972. I don't recall which locomotive this was. Number 102 is a 282 Mikado built by Baldwin in 1924 for the Sumter and Choctaw Railway. In 1972, it was out in the yard not being maintained. Now it's been cosmetically restored, it's undercover in the pavilion, and the museum has hidden a diesel engine in its tender so it can now pull trains, albeit without steam power. Number 24 is a 280 consolidation built by Alco in 1910 for the Marquette and Southeastern Railway as road number 40. That railroad became part of the LS&I Railroad, and in 1931 the LS&I made major modifications and renumbered it to 24. It's the oldest locomotive in the museum. Sioux Line 2718 is an H-23 Class 462 Pacific, built by Alco in 1923. It was out in the weather in 1972. Now it's been moved into the pavilion, and its sheathing and asbestos have been removed, but it doesn't look like much else has been done to it. 5017 and 2036 were in the pavilion in 1972 and are still there today. Santa Fe 5017 is a 210-4 Texas type built by Baldwin in 1944 for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway. 2736 is a Class K4 284 Kanawha built for the C&O in 1944. The C&O nicknamed the class Kanawha rather than Berkshire. This Shay, built by Lima in 1917, is in pieces on a flat car. It was built for the Pardee and Curtin Lumber Railway as number 12, and later sold and renumbered number 5. The fact that it's in pieces provides a better look at the inner workings of a Shay. You can see a Shay in operation in my video from the Cass Railroad. 767 is a Fairbanks Morse H10 switcher built in the late 1940s. Great Northern Railway locomotive number 11 is an Alco S2. Here are two nondescript little engines. According to Wikipedia, this boxcar is a replica. Here's a Chicago and Northwestern combo car. This item is apparently a combination mail baggage car. Here's a wooden caboose built for the Kickapoo Valley and Western, which later became part of the Milwaukee Road. 1269 is a Pullman sleeper used on the Great Northern's Empire Builder and transferred to the CB&Q in 1953 before ending up in the museum. This caboose was built by the Illinois Central's Centralia, Illinois shops in 1970. We saw an LS&I passenger car number 62 and combination baggage passenger car number 63, both wooden and built by Hicks Locomotive and Car Company in 1910. Fire concerns caused railroads to transition to steel cars shortly after that. The boys thought the vinegar car was pretty interesting. This is a Tennessee Central business car built in 1922. It would have been privately owned and used as a traveling office and hotel for high-placed executives. Here's a Chicago and Northwestern caboose. This is a dynamometer car used to measure locomotive performance metrics, such as tractive effort, power, top speed, and so forth. Out on the grounds, the museum has a variety of equipment, most of which is not in good repair. This crane is an example. My wife's friend is on the back of this observation car in 1972. I make its number out as 99, but haven't been able to learn any more about it. Here's an Atlantic Coastline dining car. This 24-seat dining parlor observation car was part of Burlington's Silver Streak Zephyr. My wife and her friend sat down at this dining table in 1972. I don't recall which coach it was. It may have been the Silver Streak, but in any case, I don't think it's open to the public now. In 1972, my wife and her friend also posed on this handcar. This time, my grandsons tried to get it to go, but it's chained down. I think it's in the exact same spot. My wife and I sat on this three-wheeled velocipede in 1972, but we weren't going anywhere either. This EMD E9 from the Canadian National Railway is the museum's newest acquisition. It was donated in February 24. Maybe they'll use it to pull some of their train rides. This is an EMD NW1 from the Minneapolis and St. Louis Railway. It was built in the late 1930s. I walked around the yard and saw some other equipment that doesn't look well maintained. I haven't researched what it all is. This Alco S3 was used to pull our train on a short excursion around the property. Passengers on the train all rode in an open-air car. That's the rest of my crew waiting for the ride to start. The ride circled the property as the conductor pointed out various rolling stock. The museum is expanding its climate-controlled space. I imagine they'll move some items from the pavilion into it and some items from the yard into the pavilion. The train stopped at what they call the hobo boxcar, and the conductor explained the meanings of some of the hobo code symbols. In fact, the museum had a scavenger hunt for kids where they searched for hobo codes throughout the museum. My daughter immediately seized on this one, which means keep quiet. The Aero train 261 and 2718 were all out in the yard in 1972. 261 is gone, but the Aero train and 2718 are undercover and look better now. Perhaps some of the other equipment in the yard will be moved in and spruced up when the new construction is completed. This is the Children's Discovery Building. The short train departs from here, and a number of interactive railroad exhibits keep the children busy while waiting for the train ride. The boys also had fun in the railroad's themed playground. It was a nice family day.